Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of EdGems. And this is our first episode of 2023. So, thank you all for tuning in today. And today, I have a wonderful guest with us, Dr. Brandolyn Hayes, who is the principal of Paramount Online Academy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I thought it was super important to have you on EdGems to really talk about remote learning, online learning, because across the globe, we all got kind of forced into it. And there was so many opinions about it. However, there's a difference between what we all experienced during the global pandemic versus a school that's intentionally crafting and planning instruction to happen online. So, how did Paramount, that has other schools in its portfolio, come to the decision to bring an online academy to life?
As you mentioned, the pandemic kind of forced us into remote learning, right? So, being a part of Paramount, as many of you know, Paramount is one of the top performing charter schools in the state of Indiana. And so, having that success with our in person schools, we wanted to make sure that we had that same success virtually, since this was something that we were kind of thrown into. And once we realized that this was something that our students needed and that our parents wanted, we intentionally planned and determined how can we replicate our on-campus model and have that same model virtually. So we took the same plan that we would replicate in our in-person schools, and we replicated that plan through our virtual school as well. So, although we were thrust into it, we intentionally planned and looked at what were the things that we needed to be successful and what did our students need to ensure that they were getting the same quality education as if they were in person.
So, speaking about that, so if I was a student in the in person learning and I switched over to online learning, you're saying that you would have the same units, the same modules, the same lesson plans.
Yes, all of our things are the same. Our cycle of instruction is the exact same, whether you are in person or virtual. All of our teachers go through the same type of observation feedback. They go through the same professional development as a network. So the only difference is we have students that get learning in person, and then we have students that get learning from their home.
So, with those lessons that are the same, how are teachers modifying them? So, could you tell us maybe what a lesson could potentially look like if I'm a parent at home thinking about, well, maybe this is an option I should try? Like, how is that lesson brought to life?
So we use a platform called Nearpod. And Nearpod gives our students the opportunity to engage in that lesson virtually through a screen. So, for example, if I am a teacher and I am asking you to read a passage and respond to questions, in person, I can go around and see, are you physically reading? Are you annotating your text? With Nearpod, through our virtual platform, our teachers can see whether students are actively participating in that lesson. We also use another platform that allows us to physically see their screens. And this gives our teachers the opportunity to see, are the students engaged? Are they meeting expectation? Are they responding to questions? Are they annotating text? So just like we can see everything a student does in person physically, when you are with us virtually, we can see everything on your student screen as well.
And one of the issues that teachers lifted up during the pandemic was that they felt like students weren't completing work. So even if they were there in class, they weren't doing work. With the online academy, is there a situation where, I guess, what happens if students aren't doing work? Or is there a suggestion that you should come to the in person school? Like, what does that look like when someone's struggling with online school?
So when we have students that struggle, because online is not for everyone, we do have conversation with students. We talk with parents, and when we recognize that there is a struggle, We do recommend one of our other schools, which is why it's so important for us to make sure that all of our platforms and all of our resources are used seamlessly. Because when something is not right for you virtually, we make that recommendation for students to go to one of our other schools.
And you mentioned that online school isn't for everyone. So, if you had to describe the profile of a student that may be a good fit for online school, what does that student has to have? And then my second question would be, what is the profile of a family that's supporting a child that's attending school online?
I would say the number one characteristic in that profile is self starter. Being able to get up and log in for school is something that is very important. We use the same cycle of instruction as our on campus schools, which means we follow the same schedule as well. So making sure that you can log in on time, making sure that you can stay focused because our live lessons are 90 minutes. And making sure that you can complete those assignments in a timely manner without having to be told several times or repeatedly to get something done. So I would say you have to be a self starter. You have to have good time management skills. And for a family that is supporting a virtual student, I would say it would be pretty much the same as someone that is sending their student to school. Be willing to check in with your student. Be open to communication with the school as far as the teachers and the administrators. And just be willing to be honest about your needs and your wants for your students. It's very important for us to know, are we meeting your students' needs? And if there's something that we can do to shift to make your student more comfortable throughout this process, that's something that we are willing to do. And as I mentioned, if it's something that does not fit a particular family, then we do make a recommendation for them to go in person. We do have some families that have students that are virtual, but also in person, because what worked for one student did not necessarily work for another. So we want to make sure that although we are giving you what you need, we also want to make sure that you're a good fit for us as well.
So, along that same line, when it comes to teachers, when the school started, did you guys pull teachers that already knew the curriculum for some of the other campuses? Were there more outside hires? And what is the profile when you're, as a principal, looking to interview a teacher who's going to teach online? What are you looking for in that teacher? And what type of experiences do you believe would be helpful for a teacher to be successful teaching online?
When Paramount first started with virtual, we did have teachers from our on campus schools that started with virtual. But when POA officially opened, I think I had maybe two teachers that had taught virtually before. The rest of the teachers that I hired had never taught virtually. So it was an experience for them as well as myself to make sure that I got the right fit when it came to the teacher that I wanted to put in front of our students. When I think about the best characteristics for teachers that teach virtually, I like to think of you as a performer, so to speak. We have to do everything that we can to make sure that our students are engaged. So I'm looking for teachers that have high energy. I'm looking for teachers that are coachable. I am looking for teachers that are willing to do what is needed to convey instruction, but also take it to a level that keeps students engaged. More times than not, when you are communicating through a screen, it can be a bit boring. It can be students are not interested. But when we have teachers that have high energy, that are willing to learn the model and also take that model and make it their own, we have a lot of success with our teachers who are willing to do that. Like I said, virtual learning is not for every student. So virtual teaching is also not for every teacher. I think sometimes teachers think that it's easy. But it's not an easy platform to always use. It's not something that you just adapt to quickly. A lot of work goes into ensuring that you are creating lessons that meet academic standards but are also engaging for students.
I appreciated the feedback you gave about the performing piece because sometimes teachers feel like they're being asked to be a performer, like especially when it's like get students engaged. And some teachers, when you're trying to do that professional development and get them to have engagement, like I'm not a performer. But I really appreciate you saying that because even before the pandemic started, I taught a college class online, and you really, even with adults in the evening after they worked all day, they expect you to bring something to the table. And I'm still teaching online even this semester. So I really appreciate that piece of. And I also would add having clear communication because with online learning, you have the video component. I can see you, you're trying to do things, but you also have to have really, really super clear directions. And as a person who was an English teacher for a while and who has worked with all types of teachers through coaching and my consulting work, some teachers are not very good writers. And we don't really want to talk about that. We really want to say that. But if you don't believe that, read teachers' lessons plans. You will see very clearly, like some people cannot write a coherent sentence, even though they're teaching in front of students. So, speaking about being a principal, and I know you have looked at lesson plans. What is the role of a principal in the online school? Are you just hopping into Zoom? And I guess the other part is that where are the teachers at? Are they teaching from home? Is there a campus that they come to and then you're seeing them on the campus at their computer? Like what does your role look like when it comes to an online school?
So all of my teachers come into a physical space. We have a building, and within that building, each teacher has their own pod. And within that pod, you will see their pods decorated as if they were in a physical classroom. They have whiteboards that they have different posters and different classroom necessities. They have multiple monitors because as a virtual teacher, you have to be able to monitor multiple things. So not only are you monitoring your Nearpod, but you may also need a screen where you are taking attendance. You may also want to make sure that you can see the screens of all of your students. So within that space, you're going to see multiple pieces of technology so that teachers can carry out their day-to-day activities. As a principal, I would say I wear many hats, much like a principal in person. I am a coach. I am hopping in and out of Zoom classrooms to provide teachers with feedback. I am also a parent liaison. I talk to parents multiple times a day. My door is always open to hear parent concerns, but sometimes I have to make those difficult calls to have conversations with parents. I am also working with other principals within our network across DEI work. I am also working with other principals in our network just on the different day-to-day things that we do and supporting new principals that are coming into our organization. So my day-to-day is never the same. I like to think about my calendar in multiple facets. When I look at my calendar at 6:30 in the morning, I like to hope that I can get to all of those things. But much like in person, you never know what's going to happen. You never know if Zoom is going to crash that day. You never know if Power School is going to crash that day. So a lot of times we just pivot. But I do wear a lot of hats to ensure that not only are our students successful, but our teachers and my staff are successful as well.
And speaking of other things that may happen at your school, when it comes to students, with school, you may have band, you may have sports, you may have clubs. Are there components of the school that students can come and participate in person activities? Or are there also online activities? Because I remember during the pandemic, We had some online clubs because we couldn't meet in person. So, are there online activities that kids can do as extracurriculars? Is there both? Like, what does that look like?
So, for our organization, I work with a great group of principals who extend their clubs to my students as well. So, we have a robotics team. Our organization also participates in sports. So, our students can play basketball, they can play football, they can run track. So, all of those activities are offered to our students, and they can participate in any one of them that they choose to. Anytime we offer incentives, more times than not, our students are excited to participate in that as well.
That's good to know. And I really like the aspect of that campus feel. So even though you're at one school, families can benefit from activities at other schools. So that is great to hear. Another concern that parents typically have with online schooling is, what if my student has a 504, an IEP, or ILP? And for people like, what are all those letters and numbers? What if my student is receives special education service and has an individual education plan? What if my student is a multilingual learner and has a individual learning plan? How are those supports implemented during online school?
So we have our director of special education and our director for student support services. They work with our teachers. I do have a special education teacher who provides services for our students that receive any type of special education service. I also have a English language learner teacher who provides services for any student that receives services through their ELP. I think it's very important for our families to know that even if your student receives a form of service through SPED or ELL, they receive that support virtually. We develop a schedule just like we would if we were in person. We follow everything to the letter when it comes to what are the expectations or what is required through those documents. And so our directors work hand in hand with our teachers to ensure that we are delivering those services in a way that is not only by the law, but what is appropriate for students that are virtual.
And I normally ask a question about special education service, multilingual education services, because there is this pervasive myth that public charter schools don't serve those students or they shush them out the door. Now, granted, there are schools and places that do that. I'm not going to say that's not a thing, but I also think that people don't understand that many charter schools do have special education teachers. They do have ELL teachers. They do have people that are writing IEPs, ILPs, and as you said, they are following the law. So I always like to lift that up when I speak to leaders who work in public charter schools, because it's important to me that we are speaking in truth and providing families with facts. Because if I'm a family and all I'm hearing is noise and I don't know the truth, then I may say that this is not an option for my child because my child has an IEP, so I can't go to this school. And to hear that the services are also offered virtually. So, for example, sometimes students will have the option of working in a small group. So, what does that look like if I'm a special education teacher serving students and someone has an accommodation that they need to work in a small group? Does that special education teacher, they pop into a Zoom like room? Like, what if I'm a parent, I'm sitting here, like, how does my kid get that? Could you kind of explain what that looks like?
Yes. So for us at POA, what that looks like, if your student has small group, a part of their IEP, their teacher will log into their Zoom class and be in that class for maybe 15 or 20 minutes so that that teacher can hear exactly what was being taught that day. That teacher also has access to the Gen Ed teacher's lesson plans. And so when it's time for small group instruction, the student is then pulled to a breakout room. So if it is small groups, the students that receive small group instruction will then be moved to a breakout room during independent practice time. That way, that allows the student that receives SPED services to still hear instruction from their gen ed teacher and then get the support that they need for their content area with the special education teacher.
Thank you for giving that specific example because I think it's really important for parents to understand like these services are still happening and what does it look like, especially you would think by now that people had an idea of Zoom, but I also know that not all parents were at home and seeing what was happening with Zoom, so they may not know like how these things are possible. But with any endeavor, sometimes there are roadblocks. So, what are some of the roadblocks you've come across in trying, in leading an online school, whether that's from the admin level, the teacher level, the student level, the family? And then what have you done to be able to push past those roadblocks?
I would have to say one of the roadblocks that we have noticed over the past 2 years is just the uncertainty when it comes to enrollment. We know that when the pandemic started, we were kind of thrust into it. And so enrollment was high at that time. And so now, when we think about, many families are much more comfortable sending their students back to in person school. So our enrollment kind of goes up and down, just depending on the needs of the families at the time. I also think another roadblock is just ensuring that families understand the expectations when it comes to being a part of a virtual school. And so thinking about that roadblock is having to consistently talk with students about attendance, having to make sure that families understand what those expectations are. So based on those two things, those were lessons that I learned from last year. So going into this school year, I made it a part of our mission to ensure that families knew from day one, these are the expectations for your students if they're going to be enrolled at POA. Letting them know what are the expectations around attendance, what are the expectations around tardies, just making sure that expectations were clear. When it comes to enrollment, sometimes those are things that I can control and sometimes I can't. But when I promote POA, I make sure that I let families know that when it comes to virtual learning, if you want your students to continue to engage as if they were in a real classroom, then POA is the place for you. And so just thinking about those roadblocks, I take them just a nugget at a time. And I just ensure that everything that we do is student led. And I make sure that I keep the lines of communication open with families. So I think by doing that, that's going to solve our problem when it comes to the uncertainty around enrollment, because POA is a choice. Virtual is a choice now. And just making sure that students and families always understand what those expectations are.
And speaking of families, what do you have? Because I know you mentioned talking to families on a daily basis. In person school, you may have a back to school night, you may have a reading night or a Title I night. So, how do you engage families with the information that we would typically give them in an in person setting?
So we also have back to school day. We partner with other schools within our network, and we host the same back to school day that the rest of our schools host as well. When it comes to communication, I send text messages. I send emails. We also have monthly meetings where we invite families to come in and we discuss a topic of the month, whether it is around data, whether it is around attendance. And for our families that are not available to come in for those meetings, I do a pre recording and I send that out to families so that they are always aware of what's going on. Our teachers also call families once a week just to provide them with an update, whether it is, hey, your student was able to get all assignments done this week, or hey, your student is missing 2 assignments. Let's make sure that we get those assignments done so that they don't go into the following week with work that's not completed. So I think we do a really good job of just keeping our families informed of everything that's going on. Our teachers also send out newsletters. So we adopt some of the same things that an in-person school would do. We just do everything virtually.
And I like how you said that there's weekly communication because sometimes in bigger school settings or in person, you don't hear from the teacher unless something goes wrong. So I
Mhm.
appreciate how you said that even if things are going well, if it's just saying that you have completed and you're on track, which also puts you in a situation that parents aren't unaware because sometimes parents are like, I didn't know the two report cards came. And then sometimes that's actually true. They didn't know until report cards came. So I think that's good for parents to hear. Like that's that weekly communication piece that you're going. The school is not some ghost somewhere that you don't hear from. Like the school is going to call you. So we talked
Right.
about roadblocks. Well, let's talk about wins. What are some areas of success? What are students saying? What are families saying? What things are going well that you really want to lift up about
Oh,
POA?
there are so many things going well at POA, and I can never take all the credit. My teachers are amazing. They work very hard to ensure that our students are successful. Last year, our data was exactly where we thought it would be as a a first year school. And so this year, coming into this year, we had over 100 families that was with us last year that chose to return to POA. So that was very a positive situation for us. But then when I look at our data and how we are performing as a school, I know that it is because of the work of our teachers and the work of our students. We just finished MOY and had some of the best data that we have had since we started POA. And so, really excited to just see where that's going to go for us. I'm also excited about the team that I have. Our teachers are very committed to the work, and knowing that I have a team that is so supportive of the vision and supportive of ensuring that our students are not just prepared for the next grade that they're going to go to, but they are prepared to step into any in person school. They are prepared to step into the world outside of Paramount. And so I'm really excited about the work that we've done, but I'm just as excited to see where we're going to go from here.
And what advice would you have to educators who want to work in a virtual school, whether that's as an administrator, a coach, a teacher? What advice do you have for them?
I would say be patient with yourself. Rome was not built in a day. And so when it comes to stepping into a world that is unknown for many, it's be patient. When you do the work, it will show up. When you are putting in all of the effort, when you are committed to the systems and the structures and the vision, things happen. And they happen in a good way. I am proof of that. Opening a virtual school in a pandemic, first year school, all the nerves, all the things took place. And I was nervous around the success of our school. But with the support of our navigation team, with the support of other principals in the network, and other educator friends that I have come in contact with in the city, they constantly told me, be patient with yourself. It's going to happen, and just keep doing the work, keep knowing that the greater cause is to ensure that students receive a quality and equitable education. And so, in order for that to happen, you have to be patient and put the work in.
Well, we're coming to the end of our show, and at the end of the show, I normally ask to give a final gem. So I'm going to give you the screen. So share your final gem or thoughts for people, whether that's educators, families, students who are considering an online school, and also tell everyone how they can connect with you and your school.
I would say my final gem for the evening is to stay committed to the work. We are building the next generation of critical thinkers, and this work is not easy. But if you stay committed to the work and stay committed to our kids, we will always see the reward with that with our students. If you are looking for a school that is virtual, that is going to provide your student with that quality education as if they were in a in-person school, please go to ParamountIndy.org and check us out. Feel free to stop by Paramount Online Academy at any time and see what we're all about. It's a great organization that has worked really hard to ensure that our students are successful.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Brandon Hayes, for joining us and kicking off our 2023 season of EdGems and sharing all the wonderful things there is to know about online learning. So I hope that if you're watching, that any myths you had, any questions you had about what online learning could look like were answered. And if they weren't, drop us some feedback in the comments, and we would love to hear any questions that you have, and we will get back to you. So I will see you next month in February for our next episode of EdGems. So everyone, have a good evening.